Well, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I think everyone knows us, but we're the Dunnes. I'm Steve.
I'm Dee.
And we have come to play rock and roll and melt your face. No, that's not really what we're doing. We're going to talk about necromancy.
Not unless you can play rock and roll on a ukulele.
We've been known to rock here and there.
Yes.
All right, so this class is intended as a survey. It's just a very basic talking about what is necromancy and what necromancy is not. Basic working definition, necromancy is any magical working that specifically deals with death and the dead. So spirits of the dead specifically. It's not comprehensive, of course. It is really designed just to give you a general schmear of the
a schmear of the occult.
A schmear of the occult. So listed on here are goals. We are going to talk about working with spirits in a mutually beneficial way, i.e. communication, how to call spirits to you, or conjuring, or conjuration, how to use spirits of the dead for gaining access to information about the past, present, or the future, possible futures, also known as divination. And we'll talk a little bit about request of aid from spirits of the dead, or petitioning.
Or ancestor bothering.
Exactly. So none of these are unique to necromancy. Necromancy is a tool. So it's just specifically dealing with how we go about
what we can do. Speaker view. Click up there where it says speaker view. There you go.
What is necromancy anyway? So according to the scholarly article Wikipedia, necromancy is the practice of magic involving communication with the dead, either by summoning their spirits as apparitions, visions, or raising them bodily for the presence of divination, imparting the means to foretell future events, discover hidden knowledge, to bring someone back from the dead, or to use the dead as a weapon. Sometimes referred to as death magic. The term may also sometimes be used in a more general sense to refer to black magic or witchcraft. Now, of course, that's a Wikipedia definition. Yeah. Although is a fair explanation culturally, but doesn't really describe what the magical practice of necromancy is. We don't go around, raising zombie hordes to take down the horde or what have not. We bring our own horde. No, but it's more of a. So there's this concept of death energy, which is, so anyone who's done energy work knows that anything that is alive or anything that has been present in a fixed place for a extended period of time has a resonance or a type of energy to it. Also is true in death. When things die, they release that energy into the universe, the cosmos, what have you. And what a necromancer does is they use that form of energy to fuel their magical workings. Necromancy is frequently no more complex than communicating with spirits for divinatory purposes. That's the vast majority of what necromancy is divination. So that's why, there was... And this is, I'm not going to get too bogged down in the history, but there's the concept that, and it comes from, this is the Christian ideation of why magic is bad. It's because you're dealing with spirits, and spirits, anytime we cross over through the life-death barrier, it gives us cause for pause. Necromancy has a reputation, and the reason why it has a reputation that is being bad, principally, I think it's because it's misunderstood. People think it's evil and stigmatized. Too many edgelords throughout the years have claimed necromancy and the D word, demonology, as buzzwords for intimidating others in esoteric spaces, and have so sullied the reputation of the art. I've talked about Christianity. it used necromancy. They used to use necromancy pretty frequently in the Dark Ages. It's actually part of. A lot of people don't know that the divination was actually pretty common in Dark Age monk work. It wasn't just like we have this concept. Oh, we pray on it and we find it. No, there was active tools of divination that were used. But now it's been demonized. So anytime something deals with death and the dead, that is a cause for it's a trigger point for a very real and primordial fear of death. It reminds us that we are mortal. And because of that, we become afraid. Sigmund Freud referred to it as thanatic aversion, or just avoiding death. We're repulsed from dead things and the concept of death because they remind us of our own mortality, and that is an evolutionary advantage of humanity, is that we know to disregard dead things because dead things beget more death. You have rotting animals around. Eventually, they're going to bring disease and so on. So. Okay, so this is where it gets a little confusing. So necromancy is both a tool and a path or a mode, okay? A lot of people can use necromancy or use, interfacing with the spirits of the dead in order to perform magical workings. That is not uncommon. People from all paths do this. Wiccans do it. Norse practitioners do it. I know for certain Western occult tradition does it pretty frequently. Shamans do it. I mean, it's a very common thing. However, those who use necromancy as a mode, as a primary source of their magical focus, interpret it slightly differently. So, yeah, I identify myself as a necromancer because my source, if you will, is the death energy. So the primary philosophical focus of necromancy, and this is going to sound way counterintuitive, but just stay with me, is an expression that is known as turning the great wheel. Okay? So if you were to imagine the progression of time and the universe and all of the events as a great wheel that shifts, what the role of the necromancer is to take that energy that has been expent out into the universe in the form of death, rework it back into moving the cycle of existence, essentially. That's what we do.
It means it's very slow magic.
Yeah, it's not your quick magic. This isn't your easy bake magic. This is it takes time. This is your slow cooker recipe.
We joke around about this a lot because I'm a root worker / a folk magician.
Yeah.
So that's very fast magic. That's very kind of almost based in superstition. You're like, when you see this, you do this. When you see that, you do that.
Right.
And Steve does a lot of that too. But it's funny because, like, if I task him with something, if I'm like, I can't do this because I don't have the chutzpah you do, he'll actually be like, he'll do it. And I'll be like, I'm not seeing any change, 2 weeks later. And he's like, no, this takes forever. Just, you're going to have to wait it out. But sure enough, as time goes on, you do eventually start seeing it. You do. Don't you, baby? Yes.
Hey, it's Emma again. Wow. How about that? All right. So
I'm burping the dog.
All right. So it is the turning the great wheel is not a singular action, but the overall focus of the necromancer's great work. It's inherently altruistic by using death to bring about positive change globally. And by globally, I don't mean in our world, but I mean like cosmos wide. Just like all magicians have their own personal interpretations of the will or the great work, all necromancers have differing views on the purposes of turning the wheel. So that's my standard disclaimer. Your mileage may vary. I will proceed into the actual tools of the necromancer.
Yeah. Oh,
All right.
Okay.
So we're going to start with conjuring. This is the act of calling a spirit to you. It is not unique to necromancy. There are a multitude of ways and means by which to call spirits of the dead. I'm going to present my method, what I do when I am conjuring or summoning spirits. Step 1, clear the space. So whatever method you use to cleanse, do that. Some people like to use sprays. Some people like to use sage. Sage isn't probably ideal just because it's typically used to get rid of spirits. But using like a nice lavender, for example.
Yep. Like a sage lavender combination.
To bring balance.
Well, yeah, here's the thing is that lavender brings spirits, but it's not discriminatory about what kind of spirits it brings. It doesn't bring spirits of good intent always.
Right.
Sometimes it brings spirits of negative intent.
Sure.
And so if you mix a sage and a lavender together, you're only going to bring in the spirits that do not have negative intent.
There you go.
Which is a double negative, but you'll understand what I mean. It only brings spirits of positive intent.
All right.
If you mix those things.
So second step is shielding.
See, I'm the same YouTube buddy.
And do you have, can you do a quick rundown of how to shield?
Yes. All right. So the first thing to shielding, I'm going to bring everybody up here so that I can see what's going on. Cool. So the first thing you do before shielding is you ground and center. The ground and center that I use, the technique I use is imagining myself as a tree on the horizon. And as that golden sun rises, absorbing that golden energy to my limbs and my roots so that my roots feel heavier than my limbs. And I just culminate until I feel that gold energy just bursting forth from me. Remember, grounding and centering isn't just a method for bringing energy within yourself. It's a method for bringing the right kind of energy within yourself to do the things that you need to do. So it's also about getting rid of some of the energy that is not useful to that. So, it's almost like changing hats. It's like, I'm doing magical work now, so let me just go ahead and ground and center. I suggest that you do this because it will help you keep your visualization going a little bit better for your shield. Shields are very simply a thought exercise. And I know that sounds really strange, but it's true. You can literally put any kind of shield that you can imagine upon yourself just by picturing that thing. So you picture yourself, but the most effective shields I've found are the shields where there's fluff. There's a fluff layer. And the reason that is if you start to feel unsafe, just like the bird bunches up when she's not feeling safe, or, lions get bigger and they get kind of angry, or bears kind of fluff up, and then you see the dogs, they have their hair on the back of their neck stand up, same with cats. They try to make themselves fluffier and bigger. Shielding with like a fluff layer, or a layer that's kind of like reminiscent of like a cotton ball, allows you to fill that layer more when you feel unsafe, therefore keeping things out of your energetic field. And that is the idea of shielding, is that you want to keep anything that you don't invite out of your energetic field. A lot of people like to use elemental magic for this. I know several people that like to use flame or fire as their shield, and there's no problem, no harm in that. But let me remind those that may identify as female or may have residual female hormones going on. If menopause is coming, maybe don't use that method, because personal summer is a thing, I can assure you, and it sucks. And it makes it 10 times worse if you use a flame shield, because not only is that flame that you're producing, that actual heat that you're producing from the inside, not going anywhere, but when it's trying to dissipate from your energetic field, it's actually making the energetic field hotter. So you're going to walk around doing this all day. But that's just a tip from me. You don't have to listen to me about that at all. Some folks imagine themselves like in a bubble of water. And My favorite go-to, though, is a shield that has like a fluff layer as the first layer, a second layer that's like a confusing layer. So like think about lasers moving around or things like that, something that's going to distract a target. And then you put like a lot of people like to use either mirrors on the outside or like shiny metal with no rivets in it. So just like, something like that. And you just kind of imagine yourself in that space. And you take that into yourself and you tell the shield that it is there until you dismiss it. And that way, it's just kind of automatic at that point because we create what we speak. And if you speak that into existence, the energy will automatically do what it needs to do. Having said that, it's always a good idea to reshield yourself every day, every time you go into a situation where you think you might encounter somebody or something that might have ill intent. The other method for shielding is to not shield at all. I know that sounds tricky and dangerous, but if you think about the energies around you as like a pool, right? So you're in a pool and you're swimming through these energies around you. When something dangerous comes your way, you either are going to try to back away from it or you're going to try to go around it, most likely, because that's the easiest thing to do in water is just to go around it. So a lot of folks will not shield and they'll just try to move around the energies around them. And then, dispel it when they're done. If they get a Klingon, they dispel it when they're gone. I personally cannot operate in that kind of space just because I don't always know when things cling on me. So I do pretty frequently shield. However, Steve does not.
Yeah, I kind of use an energetic jujutsu.
Yeah.
That's kind of my method. It's like I'll take energies that come in and I'll redirect them into other, or use them in my own workings. So I like energy. Yeah. I swim in it.
Yeah.
So, all right. So Dee did raise an interesting point that I hadn't considered when I was making my outline. Necromancy is not affinite to any particular element.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have, they worry, I can't do this kind of magic because I'm not a fire person, or I can't do this kind of magic because I'm not a water person. Necromancy belongs to all the elements.
It's the element of spirit, the fifth element.
The fifth element. Spirit. Fifth element's love. Anyway.
Well, according to movies, but the fifth element in Wiccan practice is technically spirit. So that's what that point of the pentagram is, that top point. That's spirit.
We're at the top of the point.
Right at the top of the point.
And it's also perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
As all things should be.
All right, so we've got... So I have... This is the not patented Steve Dunne spirit conjuring methodology.
Yeah.
So you're going to need 3 items, or 3
things,
material components, I guess, if you want to put it that way. A piece of a large square of black cloth.
No.
A bone, or a piece of bone, and a stone. So cloth, a bone, and a stone, and then a coin. So I guess 4 things. Sorry. So stone, bone, coin. Those are your 3 things. And then the cloth, this drape underneath.
Just so that you don't get the nasties all over your counter.
Yeah. We use black cloth just because it is...
Shall return.
Okay. It helps to repel energies, particularly negative energies.
You are the one that wanted.
So you are going to... So after you've cleared the space, you've shielded, set out the black cloth over the altar space, whatever space you're going to perform this conjuring in. And ideally, this should be done in a place where you're not going to be interrupted, or a place where, you're not going to have a lot of distractions, because it does require a lot of focus. You are going to place on the cloth in a triangle the bone, the stone, and the coin. All right? The coin will be at the peak of the triangle. So furthest away from you, the coin. And then on either side, the bone or the stone. And really, I typically use the bone on the left and the stone on the right, but, it's up to personal preference. Now, the bone can literally be the remains of any living thing. Different animals have different properties, and if it is an animal that the spirit that you are calling has an affinity to, it will be most effective. The rationale behind this is that it's basically just a visual cue for the spirit to remind them that they are dead, that they have passed from this world. It is a subtle reminder, and because it is a subtle reminder, it is not offensive to the spirit. There are times and ways that these things can get offensive, in that if it is and not that I would expect anyone to have access to this, but if it is a bone or a piece of the remains of the living thing that you are summoning, that is bad. Don't do that. You will get a confrontation with the spirit. Far beyond the scope of what this class will prepare you for. So just avoid that entirely. So, second thing, the stone. And it can be any kind of stone. Different stones have different properties. It can be a rock, it can be a gem, whatever your preference is. However, if it has some significance to the spirit being summoned, it will work better. If it has, there are manuals on top of manuals about different properties of different stones. So just do a little research before you try to go out doing any summoning of spirits. And the rationale behind this is the stone is an anchor point. It is a thing that kind of subtly, again, this is subconsciously, keeps the spirit from floating off, from going wherever it needs to go. So the coin, again, literally any coin. It is symbolic of the coin that the spirit would pay Charon in order to gain passage across the river Styx. The coin will be committed to the ritual. So you will lose this coin. So just be aware, whatever you're going to use, know that you have committed it to this particular working, and you will need to get rid of it after you are done. So don't use anything that's like a precious coin or something that's got a great historical value or whatever. It's just because you're going to get rid of it after you're done. All right. Once the ritual is complete, the coin must be buried in earth. Not thrown into a trash bin, not given away, not donated. It specifically must be buried in earth. Doesn't matter what kind it is, but it's got to be in dirt. 1 second. Stop, buddy. Okay. So there are consequences to not burying the coin. Like I said before, this is how the spirit gets back from crossing into our world to getting back to its spiritual home, its final resting place from a spiritual sense. So you called this spirit here. You've given it no way to return back to where it belongs. So do you think that's probably going to work well for you? Probably not. This is, I speak from the School of Hard Knocks. So just know that you have to give the spirit a way to get back. And that is what the coin is for. So, again, this is just a tool. So we're going to put in the middle what you've done with the spirit. Let's just put a pin in that for a second. So after you are done, you will dismiss the spirit. So this is kind of like closing circle in your, like in your Wiccan ceremonies. Or at least it means the same significance-wise. So you're closing down your ritual. After you've completed whatever you're trying to do, you dismiss the spirit by first thanking it for its presence. And the second thing you will do is you will extend the coin that you use for the ritual away from you and tell the spirit that it is for its safe passage home. And then you're going to wrap the bone in the black cloth as well as the stone. And then finally, once all of the, like I said, the coin stays out, the bone and the stone are wrapped up in the cloth, and then inform the spirit that it is free to leave the space in peace. All right, so that is your basic conjuring.
Hey, kitty. Fact. Any potted plant will do. Also, natural preserve areas. Steve and I have been known to go hiking in Pinckney.
Right.
And so one particular place along the path that we usually do that's just, it's like a former homestead, but it's all burnt out. And oftentimes he'll bring his coins there and just bury them loosely under the ground.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be done immediately. It's not like, you're going to, become possessed at the end of the day if you don't do this. It's just that, you want to be expedient about it, but not necessarily. And, you can do it like Dee was saying, any park is fine, anywhere. Just a piece of ground. It doesn't have to be something that you own. It doesn't have to be a residence. It's just, it has to be dirt.
Yep. So I think easiest in the wintertime in Michigan is going to be just potted plant of some kind.
And again, to go back to rationales, this is this comes from the Greek practice of covering the dead in dust, or covering the dead in they start by sprinkling it with dirt and then eventually, but that's it's okay. Symbolic of passing into the underworld.
Yep.
So, second tool we're going to talk about is communication. This is sensing and speaking with the spirits of the dead. It's a basic skill that is required to perform divination or petition. So this is a prerequisite. You can conjure without having the ability to communicate. I don't know why you would, but you can. Wouldn't recommend it, but that's just, everybody's got their own thing. Some people like to, get the Ouija board and call, who can we call to us without having any idea about what we're going to do with this spirit? Yeah.
I had a situation one time where some friends came over and said, they told me, well, we want to do some witchcraft and we wanted to pull you in on it. I'm like, sure, cool. Do you have a problem if I bring a spirit board? I said, as long as we're not using it, you can bring it to show me, sure. I have no problem with that. And she's like, well, okay. And then she brought it and she's like, okay, let's start working with it. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. Nuh-uh. I don't work with spirit boards. End of story. I just don't. It doesn't matter how well crafted or with love it's made. I don't like them. They bother me. I had bad experiences with them in my youth. So,
right. And everybody's got their own, biases, preferences.
Do not cross line.
So, spirits, unless you're a medium, and some people do possess mediumship, the ability to just naturally communicate. We have different tools that have been developed over time and in different cultures. The aforementioned spirit board, which is also known as colloquially as the Ouija board.
Yes board.
Which is, really just, if people aren't familiar, it is a board with letters, yes, no answers, and the idea is that through the use of the placard, you are guided towards different, subtly guided by the spirit towards different. I have questions about whether the efficacy of these, but at any rate, they exist. Some people swear by them. Some people think they're hokum. Some people are absolutely terrified of them and won't touch them. So
no, it's not terrified. It's just I don't like them.
Right. Sorry, I was using the word terrified generally. It's just like avoidance, I guess.
Yeah. I'm avoidant.
So then you have your pendulums, which, that's much more DIY user-friendly kind of deal. So, just hang the pendulum, write things on a piece of paper, wherever the pendulum moves towards indicates the answer to your question.
And that one's a lot harder to muck up.
Yeah, sure, because you're creating and destroying every time you make
you're creating and destroying, and it's not like the little on the spirit boards there's a little handheld thing, and we probably all did this at sleepovers as kids where you move it intentionally.
Yeah,
right?
Of course. Right.
And we do this to fuck with our friends, right? It's easy to mess that up. Whereas with the pendulum, it's much harder to get it to go where you want it to go.
For sure.
It's going to go where the spirit wants it to go.
Yep. And of course, and you see this in the classic, it's often lampooned, but there is definitely a cause for this, but the classic seance, where you ask direct questions and asking for a specific reply using the environment, such as, like flickering lights, knocking on walls, things like that. And then mediumship, if that's a thing you can do.
Yeah.
Not many people can, but, it's a thing. All right. So be prepared.
Yes.
The spirit may take this opportunity to ask you to do something for them. It is an intelligent creature. It has its own motives. It's not Google. Spirits are not Google.
No, they're not.
You don't just ask them questions.
If you take nothing away from this class, spirits are not Google.
You can print that.
You can print that.
So just know that when you're working with spirits, it's always best to foster goodwill. So if a benign request is made of you, I would do it. I do it all the time.
If the spirit's like, "Hey, yo, get me a glass of water," you can be like, "I got you.
I got you. Literal fam.
Yes,
I got you."
Exactly.
All right. So those are the basics of communication. And then kind of in the realm of mediumship, the idea of being able to perceive spirits. Different people have different abilities to visualize or to hear, or it's kind of under the realm of like clairvoyance, even though it's not distance seeing, it's still seeing into another realm of existence.
Spirits always come to me when I'm driving. It's cool because I have to be in the car by myself and I have to be driving for at least a half hour. And then I'll start hearing. And I always keep music going in my car, so you'd think that, I wouldn't, but no, they'll let me know that they're there. Back when I worked in Southfield, I had a 45-minute commute. My father and my grandmother were very loud most trips. But it's a very your mileage may vary sort of situation. And I think that they were able to come through because they were family and they were family that they felt very close to me. So, I got away with that. And then plus I always had coffee on me and like guaranteed if you need Shirley Zagata or Tom Dunne to do anything for you, you hand them a cup of coffee, they'll get it done. That was just them in life. So
when spirits manifest for you, is the manifestation always auditory? Like, it's always things you hear?
It's always things I hear, and occasionally I'll feel like a cold sensation of a hand on my back or something. Nothing. I don't have much psychic sight anymore. When I was younger, I had tons, but I've kind of beaten it out of myself so that I could perform in the corporate world, if that makes sense at all. Because I'll tell you, especially when I worked for Bedrock, those buildings, the buildings in downtown Detroit all have spirits attached to them because they're old. The buildings are very old. So, somebody died while working there. Mm-hmm. Somebody died probably while building there. Or
even if a person helped to build a structure and they considered that to be an important part of their life's work,
they're there.
They will, a piece of them will be there.
And it was kind of low key known at Bedrock. I was, it was well known I was a witch. It was also well known that if somebody was having a spiritual issue, I was the one that got a shoulder tap. And it was fun, but it's also like low key terrifying when one of my coworkers comes up to me and says, "Hey, there's been a spirit following me all day. Like I can sense them." I'm like, I'm like practically able to see the spirit. And she's like, "Is that my grandfather?" And like, she's an African-American woman. And this man is a pale white guy in his 30s.
It's unlikely.
The
age doesn't match.
And so like, I just kind of like opened up a dialogue with the spirit and I'm like, all right. And he died in the elevator shaft. So he was hanging out in her office for some reason because he liked her company. And she was a peppy kid. She was pretty. She was peppy. So I get it. But still, it was like, bro, y'all need to move on because, but the primarily like this, I know this is really tangential, but primarily a lot of the spirits in Detroit in those buildings, like we hear a lot about gentrification of Detroit, and that's bad. But generally the spirits down there are pretty happy that at least the buildings are getting repaired.
Yeah.
Because that was their livelihood. That was their whole lives, to make this building run, to make this building do what it's supposed to do. So the spirits were generally pretty happy that things were getting fixed.
Yeah, spirits like when things are fixed. They don't like when things are torn down.
Yeah. Generally.
Not a fan.
Not a fan.
Yeah. So just, I didn't put this on the outline, but just,
Tangential.
for your own, it's directly applicable. I find it's always best to be polite and I guess kind of just maintaining an air of civility with spirits. Not like a business transaction, but at the same time, not like, I don't know if people have watched any of the ridiculous ghost hunter type shows. They're always just very assaultive and just like, fuck you, spirit. It's like, calm down, dude.
I haven't seen Bellinger's show, but I get the feeling it's not like that. No,
I can't imagine her being like that. But like, I'm gonna call out Zach Bagans right now of Ghost Adventures. That guy is an ass. Anyway,
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I watch too much TV. All right, so basically, some people just like to talk to spirits. I'm one such person. That sometimes communication can be the beginning and end of it. Mm-hmm. If a spirit's already present, you can communicate with it. You don't need to conjure if they're already there. Like in my particular case, I always have about 4 or 5 spirits around me at all times.
Yeah, and when there's something wrong, they'll poke me.
Yeah, I usually just filter them out because ADD brain, that's what we do. We filter out noise when we want to filter that noise out.
He'll just like sit here over his shoulder like,
poke. Yeah.
And I'm like, would you cut it out? And they're like, get his attention. We're trying to talk to him about something important.
Yeah, wake him up.
Yep.
All right. So, like I said, that can be the beginning and end. Sometimes it's just a conversation. A lot of times, spirits that have something that they need to achieve, like particularly, okay, so I'm going to go off book a little bit here. Spirits have things that attach them to things in the material world. These are called chains or fetters. Use your word. But they are like the silver cord with mortals to their astral selves, right?
Yeah.
I assume people know what that is. I'm kind of going on the assumption. So our astral bodies. Basically, it's like
when you astrally project.
Yeah.
That's when they usually talk about that. That's where the verbiage specifically comes from.
Right. So when your astral self leaves your physical body, when you project, it is connected back to the physical body by a gossamer thread, a silver strand. Different texts call it different things, but that's basically the idea. Is that is the thing that you would follow back to get back to your body.
And there's an interesting subsect of magic that deals specifically with thread magic.
Yeah.
And dealing with those threads. You can wake people up if you have to with those. Right. I wouldn't recommend it unless you have to.
But that is a whole big conversation that we don't need to have right now because it's complex.
Yeah. No. I haven't even done a class on it yet.
Right.
I've used it and never done a class on it.
So spirits that have unresolved issues, what we typically refer, the difference in between spirits and ghosts are spirits that inhabit the physical world because they have unfinished business.
Yeah.
They haunt, or they just basically are trying to, either they are watching over a living loved one, or they have a material possession that they haven't resolved their attachment to. They will be connected to this through a chain, essentially. At least that's my visualization of it. So if things that those ghosts are attached to, they may need you to do something with. And any spirit that wants to get something done will be more likely and easier to communicate with because they have motivation. Anyway, that's not anything necessarily to do anything with. That is just information to put in your grab bag of knowledge.
Ta-da!
Okay, next thing, divination. This is, if people don't know what divination is, it is the act of perceiving and interpreting events from the past, present, or future, possible future events, using various methods. There are hundreds of different methods of divination, among which most popular, tarot, scrying, runes. Yeah, why would I remember runes? That's ridiculous. What's a rune? I've never seen one. No one's explained it to me. Anyway,
pendulums,
pyromancy, which is where you look into fire and interpret images that you see.
Tea leaves.
Yeah. All kinds of things.
Or sometimes you just read it off of somebody.
Right.
Like it's just there.
Soul read.
If you get into a particularly grounded space and you just concentrate on somebody for a few minutes, you can glean information from that, and it's accurate information. And I'm not just talking about, well, her hair is brown, her eyes are blue. I'm talking about things like there's an unresolved trauma there. I during my board interview for Pagan Pathways Temple, when I did a board interview, I took a look at everybody that was sitting around me at the time, and I said, I've been watching you all for a while. And I'm willing to bet that there are things that I know about you that you don't think I know. And, they kind of chuckled it off. But as time went on, they realized it was true. Yep. Because I would happen to mention something in conversation they'd never told me, but I knew was the gospel truth. That's a different kind of divination, but I'm learning that that's actually a trainable skill.
Cool.
I just haven't figured out how to train it.
Kind of put it in the psychic kind of side?
Yeah.
All right, so the reason I mentioned divination is because it can be used in conjunction or as a benefit to conjuration or spirit communications. So what I do in order to divine with spirits, so I set up the table just like I'm doing a conjuration. So black cloth, bone,
stone,
coin. And then in the middle of the triangle, I put a single taper candle. Must be white. Called spirit, just like normal. Light the candle. And then peer into the flame. And then, images will come to you.
Candle's a focus in this particular case.
Right. So you will, and you can ask questions of the spirit revolving around the images. They help clarify it for you. And then, of course, as I mentioned prior, same dismissal as you would in the previous conjuration. All right, so here's where things get a little more complex and potentially more consequential, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't want to say dangerous because I don't believe that any magic is inherently dangerous, but there are more lasting effects to this.
Mm-hmm. And remember, because necromancy is turning the big wheel and slow, you may not notice consequences for 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years out.
Maybe your descendants.
Maybe you create an ancestral curse for them without even meaning to.
Or an ancestral boon. You never know.
Well, that's fair. That's fair.
So petitioning is putting out a request to the forces that be. Deities. Spirits.
Elementals.
Any entity that you want to work with. So in this particular case, because we're talking about necromancy, we're talking about petitioning spirits. Mm-hmm. So in root work / hoodoo, there is a lot of work with saints, or the Catholic saints.
Yes. Or Catholic saints that aren't actually Catholic saints, that are actually goddesses that they made into Catholic saints.
Also true.
Because pagans wouldn't convert.
Also true. So for the purpose of the petition, what you will need is a candle that is appropriate for the task. So you're going to have a thing that you are asking for. Like, let's say I need to get this job, or I need to get the landlord off my back, or whatever.
I need somebody to be kinder to me.
Right. Not love. Don't ask for love.
Don't.
We've covered this.
Yeah.
There are 3. No, I was going to pull Aladdin. There are 3 rules. No killing anybody. No love. No. Anyway.
And I can't bring anyone back from the dead.
Yeah, can't bring anyone back to you. They wouldn't like the results. So you're going to have. So there's a multitude of information about this available through any number of sources. I'm not going to go over all of it, but basically it's just there are colors rather, that correspond to specific intents.
Yes. And if you don't know what color candle you need to use, think about what certain colors mean to you. And that would be the color to use.
Absolutely.
I would say trust your intuition more than what you read on Google in this particular case.
Yes.
Because herbs have different correspondences to people. For example, when I think of lavender, I think of a very safe smell because my dad always used it as cologne. He always used it as deodorant. And so when I smell lavender, it's immediately I'm back in my parents' bathroom at 8 years old, smelling my dad's oils. But for some folks, because the lavender has brought up certain things for them in the past, they have, something associated with it. Yep. And it's not a positive association.
So the big ones are usually money, because people need resources, people need money. So a green candle would be appropriate for that.
Yeah.
But, again, it's what you connect with that, right?
Yeah.
So you're also going to need a parchment or a piece of paper at very least. Construction paper, the sturdier usually the better. Ideally, you should have parchment paper, but
it should be something that is of a skin tone similar to the person that you're petitioning for.
There you go.
Which you should always be petitioning for yourself. And if somebody else needs help, you should let them do their petition.
Oh, yeah. Don't petition for other people.
That's just bad. Generally don't. And especially when you have spirits involved, because you're going to catch the karma from that. They're not.
It's true.
And you don't want that ancestral karma if it's bad. So.
Okay. So you're going to take the parchment. You are going to write on the parchment your request, and it should be a question or it should be a sentence, not a book.
Yep.
Some people we saw a meme recently. We're talking about 18 lines of a petition, and then your spirit guardian's just like,
"Are you kidding me?
Please." So
can you just change the light white, please?
So you write out the petition. Place it under the candle, light the candle, call the spirit, repeat.
Yep.
And then, of course, you're going to have the communication. This is why it's a progressive buildup of skills. So you're going to need to know how to conjure before you can know how to petition. So it's
before you can divine.
Yeah.
Before you can divine to figure out what you need to petition for.
Yep.
Because sometimes you need something, but you don't know what.
Right.
And that's where the divination comes in handy. My favorite kind of divination when dealing with spirits is, hey, bros, I sense there's something headed toward me. Can you give me some idea? And then I'll pull a card from my tarot deck. And that'll give me some idea of what that person is and what they're like. Because, if I pull swords, I know that there's somebody probably with dark hair, dark eyes, probably fairly tall, and that they have a very sharp wit about them, And so there are archetypes that can be drawn from all those different tarot cards and from those things. But I don't use that often just because usually if something's headed toward me, I know, and I know why. I'm not trying to sound like all-knowing, all-seeing Pooh-Bah or nothing. But
you got senses.
I got senses.
Another good one, this is a quick and dirty, is bibliomancy.
Oh, dude, yes.
This is one of my favorites, just because, despite being an occultist and being a pagan and so on and whatever else I am, I'm also fascinated by the Christian mythology. just generally. I always have been. Like, whenever I think of like, I guess like end of the world type scenarios, for some reason, the end of the Bible, the Book of Revelations, seems more like what the end of the world would look like than like Ragnarok, even though that is my faith. Ragnarok seems more like a parable or more like a allegory than the physical actual what's going to happen. Whereas I don't know if it's just because I was raised with it or whatever, but Revelations always seemed more of a literalist interpretation of what the end of the world's going to look like. And I am an apocalyptian, so like I'm very, very intrigued by how the world's going to end. But I digress. So bibliomancy is you ask a question, and you can get spirits involved. You can just do it as a, hey, let's check this out, like a tarot reading would be. But then you take a book. It's
usually the Bible.
It's usually the Bible. And the reason it's the Bible is not because of spiritual confluence. It's because it's a big book with a lot of words in it.
Yep.
That's just it. It's a big book with a lot of words. So then you just...
And there are certain passages that mean certain things.
Right, exactly. So you kind of, you feel it, you put the energy into it, and then you just flip it open. And then you point, and then you read that passage.
Yep.
And it is going to give you some kind of insight into what's going on.
A few times I've done it, it's been kind of scary.
I think it's fun. I dig it.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying it's been scary accurate.
Scary.
Not
scary accurate.
It's been just kind of like, wow, that's...